Today we're honored to hear Chair Jeff Cogen give his State of the County address. But first, some announcements. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners ensures we put on the state's best civic programs week after week. I'd like to thank our media partners, including Oregon Business Magazine, and our Friday Forum winter sponsors, Bank of the Cascades, CenturyLink, Miller Nash, Regents, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and The Standard. We're grateful for your support and commitment to City Club's mission. Please join me in a warm round of applause for all of them. Today, I also want to take a moment to thank Sharon Van Sickle Robbins for her leadership the last 6 months as City Club's acting executive director. Sharon has been a City Club member for more than 20 years, serving on research and event committees, as well as being club president in 2010-2011. When I asked if she would step into the role of acting executive director, she came in and said yes, not only keeping the club going, but taking it to a new level with additional work and expanding of the mission. She strengthened the club during her time here by building relationships with current and new members, building partnerships with corporate sponsors, and providing vision and guidance to club programming. She helped lead a robust executive director search. She had been involved in the previous executive director search and had that experience to lend to all of us. And that new search has led us to an opportunity for transformational change as the club heads toward its 100th year of existence. Thank you, Sharon, for all of your work. I want you to come up here, if you would, for just a moment, and let everyone congratulate you for your good work on behalf of the club.
Thank you. Thank you.
I also wanted to give you this card.
Thank you very much.
Next week, we will be hearing from the chair and vice chair of the 4 Oregon Advocacy Commissions, the Commission on Hispanic Affairs, Black Affairs, Asian Pacific Islanders, and Women. They will talk about how much has been achieved in the last 3 decades since the commissions were created and what their priorities are for the 2013 legislative session. You can learn more about future City Club programs and events on our website, pdxcityclub.org. We will be having a question and answer session with Jeff Cogen at the end of today's program. Members, please come to the microphone to ask your questions. For all of our audience members, please locate the index cards that are on your table and write your questions on them during the forum. We will collect them prior to the start of the Q&A period. And now, our program. Multnomah County has always been the place for essential services to keep everybody in our community safe, healthy, and strong. Community needs for critical services continue to rise as residents face unemployment, foreclosures, and a tough economy. So how will the county thrive in its mission to help people during tight budget times? And where does the county go from here? In his State of the County address, Multnomah County Chair Jeff Cogen will outline how innovative and collaborative solutions can address our local needs. Jeff Cogen is the chair of the Multnomah County Commission, Oregon's most populous county. As Chief Executive Officer, Jeff oversees the nearly 4,500 employees who provide health and human services, public safety, and other services to more than 735,000 residents. Without further ado, please help me welcome Multnomah County Chair Jeff Cogen.
Thank you. Thanks. It's really great to be here. You know, in the course of a year, you might guess, speak to a lot of different groups. But it's always really exciting to come here and do my State of the County speech in front of the City Club. And it's exciting for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's City Club. And it's great to be able to speak to a group of folks who are so informed and engaged and even ask hard questions. And that's not a challenge. But the other thing is, it's the State of the County speech. And by its nature, the State of the County speech requires me taking time reflecting on what's happened over the course of the last year and thinking forward about the year ahead and what we're going to be facing. And frankly, in the really busy lives that we all lead, and certainly that I lead as chair of the county commission, it's often not easy to have that time to reflect. And I really appreciate the fact that this forces me to do that. And as I've spent time these last couple of weeks thinking about the state of the county and what I wanted to speak with you about today, I had a couple of realizations. The first is just how lucky I am to be able to have this job in this community at this time. You know, I've spoken with you in the past and shared with you my feeling that when it's really working, government is the way that a community comes together to address the challenges that it faces, that it's us, not them. But that's hard to remember in this crazy world we live in, particularly when our federal government all too often is characterized by stalemate and bitter partisan battles and really kicking the can down the road. But here at Multnomah County, we've been able to do it differently. And I'm really proud and really excited to be part of this team. So I want to take a moment first to thank folks. But the first thanks I want to give is actually to all of you. Because on a sunny day in February in Portland, you're all inside listening to me. I don't know what's wrong with you, but thank you for being here. I really appreciate that. And I do have a number of people I want to specifically acknowledge, but I want to first just thank my family. I have family and friends here, but particularly my wife, Lisa, and my kids, Johanna and Alex. And my kids are able to be here today because they're not in school. And as a parent who often struggles to deal with these crazy teacher service days, this is the first time I can ever really thinking, thank you, Portland Public Schools, for letting my kids come and join me today. Johanna and Alex, thanks for being here. But when I think about what's going on at Multnomah County, I get really excited because in this age of gridlock, we at Multnomah County are doing things differently. We really have been characterized as a board of county commissioners by working together, collaborating, innovating. We respect each other professionally. When we disagree, that's okay. We move on and work together on other things. And because of that, in this age of gridlock, this county board is, I think, more than anything else, characterized by getting things done. And that's true whether it's the East County Courthouse, which, remember Mike Shrunk, who retired recently after 32 years of service? He told us that when he was new on the job, the East County Courthouse was something that was long overdue. Well, we finally got it done last year, and it's open and serving the residents of East County, and I'm really proud of that. That's a big deal. Thanks to the leadership of my board, we've taken more than 3 acres of prime downtown property at the very bridgehead of the Morrison Bridge, which had been spending decades being underutilized as surface parking lots, and have sold it to the James Beard Public Market and their partners at Melvin Mark to be turned into the James Beard Public Market, which is going to give Portland the year-round food market that it needs and deserves to recognize, support, and celebrate this incredible food economy that we have, as well as to liven downtown Portland and put the properties back on the tax rolls. So that's a really great achievement. I'm looking forward to that coming to be in the next couple of years. And thinking of cans that have been kicked down the road for decades, there's the Selwood Bridge. The Selwood Bridge, which many people think was overdue for replacement shortly after it was completed almost 90 years ago, on the cheap with leftover materials from other bridges. And for decades, it was our #1 transportation priority, rated 2 on a scale of 100, with 100 being best by the federal government. And I'm really happy to say that we have now started replacing the Selwood Bridge. That project's going on right when we're here. And that's a big deal. We've also been able to work in partnership with the City of Portland, the State of Oregon, and community nonprofits to make important services that our community needs, but which none of us could bring alone, happen. Things like the new Gateway Center for Domestic Violence, which is a community collaborative to provide a one-stop center for victims of domestic violence, or the Mental Health Crisis and Assessment Center, which provides a place for people in a mental health crisis to go so they don't go to jail or a hospital. These are phenomenal new projects that we've been able to do, frankly, because of our partnership and because we've been willing to set aside silos and just focus on what the community needs. This is a really big deal, and I just want to take a moment to honor, thank, and appreciate my colleagues on the Board of County Commissioners who are with us today, Commissioner Deborah Kafori, Commissioner Loretta Smith, Commissioner Judy Shipwreck, and Commissioner Diane McKeel. Let's give it up for them. They rock. I'm also very happy that we have our sheriff here today. Sheriff Staten has a very significant responsibility in protecting the public safety of this community. We run the jails and we do law enforcement in areas outside the cities. It's a challenging job and he's risen to the occasion, but he's also done it in a way that reflects unique Portland values, which has earned him the nickname the Green Sheriff, because we have now created the most sustainable jail system in the entire United States, and that's something we should be proud of, not the least of which because it's saving us $500,000 a year in operations. Thank you, Sheriff Staten. And we have our new district attorney, Rod Underhill, who, as you all know, is filling some pretty big shoes for Mike Shrunk, but he's not a newbie. He's been part of that team for a long time. Rod, among other things, played a leadership role in helping build the Gateway Center for Domestic Violence, which shows that he gets that not only do we need to have good enforcement, but we need to have creative problem solving in our district attorney's office, and I'm sure Rod's going to give us many years of great leadership. Thank you, Rod. And I'd also like to acknowledge our phenomenal auditor, Steve March. Now, a lot of folks don't know what the auditor does. But in a nutshell, what he does is hold the rest of us accountable. He makes sure that the work that we do at Multnomah County is cost-effective and on track, and he makes sure that our performance is as it should be. It's extraordinarily important work, and thank you, Steve, for what you do for this community. But in thinking about the great work that happens at Multnomah County, the simple truth is, while leadership is important, on a day-in, day-out basis, the reason Multnomah County is doing such good work is because of the 4,500 Multnomah County employees, public servants who show up every single day to treat the most vulnerable people, to protect our public safety, to serve our libraries, to teach our young folks. These are people who are giving back each and every day, and we all owe them our gratitude and our support. Thank you, Multnomah County employees. And last but not least, I'm almost done with thank yous, but there's another one I really want to give, and that's probably our single most important partners at Multnomah County are our partners of the City of Portland. And most of my colleagues at the City of Portland are here with us today. Commissioner Saltzman, unfortunately, is sick, but Commissioner Fish, Nick Fish, Amanda Fritz, I know Steve Novick is here, and new Mayor Charlie Hales is here with us as well. We look forward to continuing to partner together. Let's acknowledge the great folks who are leading the City of Portland. Thank you for being here. And the other thing I was thinking about, besides the fact that there's a lot of folks I want to thank, is that this is a really challenging time to run a government. It just is. On the one hand, we're in the 5th year of this seemingly endless economic catastrophe that our country has been through. We're slowly clawing our way out of the recession. But for people who are vulnerable, for people who are suffering, for people who are out of work, I can assure you, these are not good times. And for government that is struggling to meet these needs, it's a particular challenge because we have this unfortunate phenomenon that when the need goes up, our ability to respond to the need goes down, the resources are down. And so we're constantly struggling to be as cost-effective as possible, to innovate and to create new ways of providing those services. But it's not easy. The other thing that I realized is that this challenge is made harder by another factor that's been going on in our country for a long time, probably since Ronald Reagan was president, and famously said that government was the problem, not the solution. I'm not a big fan. And I'll tell you, I think that attitude, which has festered and grown in our country since then, has led to tremendous cynicism, has meant tremendous distrust of government, and has made a lot of alienation. It's made people feel like there's nothing we can do, that there's no way to improve our community. And I really think that's a problem. and as someone who believes that we have the ability to come together to address our problems, and that government has the important role to play and a very positive role to play, we need to battle that misperception. And I think that one of the ways we can help battle that misperception, aside from just saying it's wrong, is by showing inspirational examples of government getting it right, of government making a difference in the lives of our community, and making a difference in the challenges that we face collectively. But inspiration doesn't just happen. In order to be inspired, you need to have something inspiring. You need excellence. And excellence only occurs when you, first of all, strive for greatness. And striving for greatness requires innovation, it requires executing perfectly, it requires continually trying to improve, and it requires being willing to risk failure. And that is the simple truth. This is no great realization for anyone who works in the private sector. As a former entrepreneur, I know this. If you look at any of the great companies that have emerged in America, Google or Yahoo or Nike or Facebook, these are people who made tremendous risks. And there's a lot of others you haven't heard of because they're the ones that failed. And that's the truth. But the ones that succeeded, succeeded brilliantly. And that's true in government as well. If we want to do things differently, we've got to take risks. And we've got to be willing to sometimes fail. Now, when I talked with my chief of staff, Marisa Madrigal, who's here with us today, and told her that I thought that my theme for my State of the County speech was being willing to fail, she was not enthusiastic. And, I get it. I understand why. She was imagining headlines in tomorrow's paper, Jeff Cogen promotes failure. And now I'm sure she's looking around to see who's trying to tweet, come up with 140 characters, at Jeff Cogen loves to fail. So for Marisa's sake, let me just state really clearly, I don't like to fail. I don't want to fail. I want to succeed. I want to make things better in a really meaningful way. But I really believe it's the case that if we want to make things really better, if we want to make great things happen, we have to be willing to take some risks. And frankly, that means sometimes we're going to fail. But we're going to also succeed. And I believe in net, if we're smart about this, we can make great things happen. And let me be really clear. Taking risks does not mean being reckless. I'm talking about taking smart risks, measured risks, looking carefully at the risk-reward, the cost-benefit. But sometimes you still have to take those risks. And I decided that I wanted to model that today. And so, although I've never done this before at the City Club, I didn't write a speech. I decided instead, no audio visuals, no props, except I bought a rock, which I'll share with you in a minute. But instead, I did think about what I wanted to talk about. I wrote some notes. I've got a couple of index cards here, so I'm not winging it, but I'm not scripted, because I believe by doing it this way, there's the chance that I'm going to be able to be more compelling, more engaging, have a more dynamic conversation, and hopefully dialogue at the end for the questions. And we'll see if I'm right. But I also feel like it's important to walk your talk, and that's what leadership needs to do. If we want to encourage an organization to take risks, as leaders, we need to be willing to take risks. And so today I want to share with you some of the ways in which I believe Multnomah County government has been taking smart risks, has been innovating, and has been making great things happen for this community. And the first example I want to share with you is something that probably some of you are already familiar with. I mean, if you weren't before, I've already talked about it, and that's the Selwood Bridge. Selwood Bridge was a big problem. We finally, after really huge number of years, and with the leadership of Commissioner Deborah Kafori, came up with a plan for replacing it. And it was a good plan, but we have tough times. And one of the things we realized with the plan that we had was it was expensive. And so we looked carefully at trying to make it less expensive, trying to be as cost-effective as possible while meeting the needs of the community. And while the original plan called for us to do what is very often done with bridge construction, and build it in place. So leave the current bridge in place and build a new one on half of it while you close half of it, and then build the other half of it while you use the other half of it. And that is very viable, and it would have worked. But while we were doing what we call value engineering, trying to get it to be as cost-effective as possible, another alternative was presented. The idea that we could actually take the metal superstructure of the bridge, the part that's secure, and move it to some temporary pillars, while then getting rid of the shaky underpinnings of the bridge and building the new bridge where the old one was. Doing it that way had a lot of advantages. It should be able to shave up to $10 million off the project cost and make the whole project happen a year earlier. But there was the moving the bridge thing, which kind of was risky. It's been done before, but you know how it's done? They take these Teflon skids and they lubricate them with Dawn dish soap. The brand is apparently important. They use Dawn dish soap. And then they have, I'm just kidding, I'm not kidding. It sounds crazy, but it's true. And then they have these hydraulic presses and they move it. And for this bridge, we had to move it 60 feet on one side and 30 feet on the other side. And so there were some questions involved with that. Our engineers told us it was going to be doable, but no one guaranteed success. And if anyone has read the newspaper or watched television the last couple of weeks, you know it worked. I probably wouldn't be talking about it if it didn't, but yeah, it worked. Hence my prop today. This rock is what's remaining of the Selwood Bridge underpass, or the support structure from before. And I'm happy that's all. If you looked at this rock, you realize that's not really that solid. But now the Selwood Bridge is on new, temporary, but much safer metal supports. It's moved successfully. The whole project's going to be about $10 million less, and it's going to open a year earlier. That was a risk we took that had tremendous rewards for this community. I'm really proud, I'm really relieved, and I'm really thrilled to say it's happened. And it's one that you're probably a little familiar with. But unlike the Selwood Bridge, most of what Multnomah County does not dominate the headlines. And so I want to share some other examples of this with you, because I think some of it's really inspiring and give you an example of how we're trying to cope with challenging times. The first one has to do with public safety. As I mentioned when I talked about the sheriff, Multnomah County has tremendous responsibilities in the public safety realm. We run the jails, we run the parole and probation services, we have law enforcement responsibilities, the district attorney's office, we work in partnership with the police. Together, we're all about trying to keep the community safe. But we're also focusing on trying to do it in a cost-effective way. And one of the things that unfortunately is the case is that the public safety alternative, which is the easiest and safest, meaning putting people in jail, is not necessarily the most effective and is definitely the most expensive. And as we've been suffering from really challenging budget times, we've had to reevaluate. Are we doing this right? Are we actually spending our money in the best way and getting the best results? And fortunately, the folks at our Department of Community Justice, led by Scott Taylor, came up with another suggestion. They've been paying careful attention to evidence-based practices in criminal law and criminology. And what they found was, when it comes to the idea of incarcerating people, the length of incarceration does not always make it better. In fact, sometimes makes it worse. Our Community Justice Department, Parole and Probation, uses an awful lot of our jail beds, as many as 600 a couple years ago. And those are for people who are violating the terms of their parole and probation. Previously, when someone violated parole and probation, we put them in jail for as long as we could, because we were sanctioning them and we wanted them to be accountable. We wanted to keep them off the streets. But we also wanted to get good public safety results. And what this research told us is what really matters most is not the length of the stay, it's that the sanction be swift and certain. And interestingly enough, what we found out was that sometimes the length of stay actually has negative inputs. The longer people stay in jail, turns out they pick up bad habits. So sometimes you put people in jail for a long time and they come out and it's worse. And so we created what we call the Effective Sanctions Project. And we reevaluated whether or not how long people needed to be put in jail after violating parole and probation. And the effects have been dramatic. The effects have been dramatic. Parole and probation is now using 150 fewer jail beds than they were before, which is saving millions of dollars for this community, which can be reinvested into other types of public safety programs like alcohol and drug treatment, which we know make a big difference in the long term. The length of stay for people who are violating parole and probation has decreased on average from 19 days to 15 days. It may not sound like a lot, but it's saving us all this money. But you know, it wouldn't really be a good investment. It wouldn't be important savings if the end result was that we were having lots of crime in our communities. But that's not what's been happening. What we have found is that not only are we saving money, but the rearrest rate for the people who have been sanctioned has dropped by almost 20%. So what we're getting is better results for less money. And that is the kind of innovation we need to have in this community, keep our community safe. But wait, there's more. Another area where we've been making really big progress in meeting community needs by responding in innovative ways has to do with the crisis in hunger that has been afflicting this state. It's hard to believe, living in Oregon where everything grows. Anyone who's got a yard knows everything grows constantly here. It's hard to believe, but this is one of the hungriest states in the country. And hunger has become a huge problem, unfortunately, particularly for young people, for children. And at Multnomah County, where one of our key charges is to protect the most vulnerable people in our community, we knew we had to do something. And what we did, first of all, was to build upon an innovation we had already created, an innovation we created in partnership with the city and the school districts called our Sun Schools. Sun Schools, Sun stands for Schools Uniting Neighborhoods. And the idea is to take school buildings that are used during the day, but often empty in the afternoon and early evening, and provide programming in the afternoons and evenings, academic support, recreational support, social service support, so young people have a safe, healthy place to be after school. It's a great program in and of itself. It's something that's gotten us national acclaim. But we knew we could do more because the Sun Schools were a perfect platform for helping deal with the hunger issue. Unfortunately, it's the case that for a lot of low-income kids, the only regular meals they get are the breakfast and lunch they get through the school feeding programs. And so one thing about Sun Schools is we said, well, are there ways that we can help with that? Can we expand upon it? That's largely federal dollars. Well, we realized, first of all, we've got them in the afternoon and the evening, and so we've set up a school supper program. So a lot of these kids who otherwise were going to go home hungry are getting supper at school, an other meal largely financed by the federal government, which is wonderful, and helping really make a difference for these young people. But again, we realized there's more than that, because what about the weekend when they're not in school? And partnering with local businesses, we created what we call the backpack program, where kids on Friday get a backpack full of food they get to bring home so they have food to eat over the weekend. Again, another big improvement. But then we have realized, well, what about the summers? And so we've been working, too, with Portland Parks especially, to build increased summer eating programs in the summertime as well, using our Sun Schools as a base. And then we went even further than that, partnering with the food bank. We've now set up food pantries at 8 of our different Sun Schools around the county. So, because it's often the case, in fact, it's always the case. If you've got hungry kids, what have you got behind them? Hungry families. And so now families of these kids have the ability to come in to the school where they're already dropping their kids and have a food pantry available through the food bank. It's been a tremendously successful program. Collectively, all these actions are providing hundreds of thousands of new meals to hungry people in our community, and we're doing it by building on an innovative infrastructure we already had. That has made a big difference. But that's not all we've been doing for hunger. We also have a very innovative program called our County C.R.O.P.S farm out in Troutdale, where we actually took some vacant, unused county land and partnering with community organizations and using volunteers and people doing community service work, we've actually turned it into a farm. And the farm is entirely dedicated to growing food for the food bank in East County. And it's been so successful that the food bank in East County, Snow-Capped Charities, has now told us that half of all the fresh food that they distribute to East County residents is being grown on the County C.R.O.P.S farm. That's making a difference right there. And in one of the things I find most exciting, innovation builds innovation. When you start to have an organization innovate, it builds a culture of innovation. And here's a great example of that. Our County C.R.O.P.S farm, really cool, I just told you about it. Once it started operating, we started to think, what else can we do with this? And we've come up with a couple of additional programs that are awesome. One of them, in partnership with our community justice, and particularly our juvenile justice workers, we've created something called our Restitution Garden, where we've taken an additional acre of land out at the C.R.O.P.S farm, and working with young offenders, we're bringing them out there to grow food. They're learning valuable life skills, they're learning responsibility, they're learning to take responsibility for their action, and the food that they grow is then sold, and the proceeds are used to pay restitution to the victims of their crime. That's a win-win. And our latest innovation at the C.R.O.P.S farm had to do with a more profound issue, the notion of who's going to grow our food. Because as we've been getting into this work and working on food systems, we've discovered that there's a real challenge in who's going to grow our food because farmers are aging. The average farmer in the state of Oregon is almost 60 years old, and we need to make sure there's another generation of farmers coming up behind them. And there are young people who are getting interested in farming again, but they need to know how to do it. And so at our county C.R.O.P.S farm, we've partnered with the OSU Extension Service, and we've created a beginning urban farmer apprenticeship program that has trained dozens and dozens of people, and is continuing to do so, to go out and grow food themselves. And that's a sustainability issue, and that's another way we're helping make sure that there's enough food to feed hungry people in this state. So that's Multnomah County's response to hunger. Another kind of cool thing, I think. But as you're going to see, innovation really runs deep at Multnomah County. Another core responsibility we have is for healthcare, for making sure people in this community are healthy. Now, a lot of folks here are familiar with the fact that our healthcare system has got some problems. Now, last year and the year before, there was a big battle nationally, and now we know the Affordable Care Act that President Obama proposed is going to become the law of the land. And the basic premise of the Affordable Care Act is that we need to change our approach to health care. We need to change the incentives so that people don't have an incentive to over-deliver care, and we need to change the approach to be, let's make people healthy, keep people healthy, rather than wait till they get sick and spend a fortune trying to get them healthy again. That work is being nowhere more advanced than in Oregon, where Governor Kisshaber has taken the lead and created the statewide network of community care, comprehensive care organizations, not CCOs. And the CCOs are designed to take that in action here in Oregon, and they're really working. It's a tremendous experiment. But what they do is they bring together everyone involved in the healthcare system. And so our CCO regionally involves, first of all, the 3 counties, Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington, but as well, all the other key players in the health system, the hospitals, the health plans, groups of doctors. And we're all getting together to try and change the incentives and to try and keep people healthy and to do it while spending less money. And Multnomah County is a key partner in this. And the reason we're a key partner in this is that this is what we've been doing for the last 10 years. We've been doing it in a couple of different ways. First of all, we've been national leaders in prevention. We got early on the fact that the best way to keep people healthy is to make it so they don't get sick in the first place. And we've done some real path-breaking work, particularly in things like obesity, where we were one of the first communities in the country to pass a rule creating a requirement that chain restaurants would put menu labels up so that people could make informed decisions about what they will eat. The notion being, we're not telling people you can't eat unhealthy food, we're giving people information to make healthy choices should they so decide. After Multnomah County acted, the state of Oregon acted, and other states acted, it then became national law. It was actually part of the Affordable Care Act. And starting next year, all across this country, Americans are going to have access to this information, and Multnomah County played a critical role in getting that ball rolling, and I'm really proud of that. But our prevention work has gone beyond that. Our Healthy Eating Active Living program served as an exciting experiment in North Portland, whether you could work with the community to make a community healthier. And it was so successful that the Federal Centers for Disease Control gave us a $7 million grant to build it throughout the community. And what we've done is build community capacity so that churches and senior centers and others know about healthier alternatives, understand the information that they can have to help grow healthier people. And that work is why we are considered nationally leaders in the prevention side. But it's not just the prevention side that makes us so suited for this healthcare reform. We've also been leaders in the clinical side. We were very early adopters of electronic medical records, and the reason that's important is the truth is people often go see lots of different providers. And I don't know about you, but I have trouble remembering who I've seen and what I've told them. But with electronic medical records, the providers have access to all the information. It allows providers to communicate and to provide a more coordinated care for the patient. That's an important step forward, as is this other approach that Multnomah County has taken a lead on, the notion that we want to make sure you stay healthy. So when our patients have, for example, diabetes, we don't necessarily wait till they don't take their medicine, go into shock, and show up at the emergency room. We have community health workers whose job it is to make sure they're staying healthy, to make sure they're taking their medicine, to get ahead of the game, to look at other factors that can keep them healthy. These together are about what healthcare reform is. The notion that we need to keep people healthy and we need to change incentives so everyone focuses on that. Together, this is going to be a big challenge. The mere fact that we've been practicing it doesn't mean it's going to work. But I feel very positive, and Multnomah County is absolutely at the cutting edge of this work nationally. The last way I want to talk about that innovation and risk-taking has transformed some of the key programs that we provide at Multnomah County has to do with our library system. Now, you may know that Multnomah County has one of the best libraries in the country. It's been, yes. But unfortunately, until very recently, this fantastic library system was resting on pillars that weren't very much more secure than the Selwood bridges. And really what the fundamental problem was the funding for our libraries, because 70% of the library's money was coming from temporary levies. And these temporary levies had two really big problems with them. One, the mere fact that they were temporary made it almost impossible to do long-term planning and to plan long-term investments in the system. So you really need, when you have a permanent institution, there's tremendous advantages to having permanent funding, just for planning and operations. But it's more than just that. Because of Oregon's idiosyncratic property tax system, the other thing that was the case is that the temporary levies increasingly were inadequate to fund the operations of the library. And the library, because of this phenomenon called compression, was winding up with less and less money each year, and we were facing deeper and deeper service cuts. And that was a big problem. And we were concerned that this great library was on the threshold of losing its greatness. And so last year, my colleagues and I, despite the fact that we were in a recession, decided it was time for leadership and decided it was time to change this. And we decided to bring forward a measure to create a permanent library funding district to provide stability and adequacy to the funding of our libraries, regardless of the other situations. We brought this forward, frankly, despite the naysayers, and there always are. Certain local newspaper who shall remain unnamed thought it wasn't the right time. There's always someone who thinks it's not the right time. That's something you have to come to terms with. If you're in leadership, you need to be guided by your guide star, because no matter what it is you're trying to bring forward, someone's going to tell you this isn't the time to do it. But I believe it was. Our libraries did not have time to wait. It was a great institution that was on threat, and I'm really happy to say I live in Multnomah County, where 63% of the people agreed with us, passed that library district, and our libraries are secure. There's a couple of things I want to say about the library. I mean, the most important thing about this library is that we saved it. We preserved this wonderful community resource. We're going to rebuild services. But there's a couple of things about it that I also want to point out that I think are significant. One is we did this in collaboration with our partners at the City of Portland. Because, as I mentioned, we have this wacky property tax system. And one of the strange effects of it is sometimes when you're funding a program, it has the perverse effect of taking money away from others. And that's what happened in this particular circumstance. By creating the library district, the City of Portland was going to be losing revenue. But because we were operating in partnership with the city, I worked hand in hand with former Mayor Sam Adams, now City Club President Sam Adams, and we... And we created an intergovernmental agreement that would help minimize the city's losses by decreasing the city's obligations to the Selwood Bridge project by $14 million, and by having the county agree to pick up the funding of 8 Sun schools that were being paid for by the city's children's levy. And this type of partnership is absolutely critical, because frankly, at the end of the day, we need to respect each other, we need to work with each other, and we need to support each other, and we cannot have a community where we say something like, "That's your problem." Because frankly, it's all of our problems. And this community needs that kind of partnership. But there's another point I want to make too, and that has to do with where I started this conversation, on the notion of excellence. Our library system is excellent. It's a great system, and it was under tremendous threat. That should sound familiar to Oregonians, a state that has seen almost all of its public services come under great threat. In a state where we've seen our university system get defunded again and again and again, and where we've seen public schools suffer cut after cut after cut, you can sometimes it's easy to imagine just throwing your hands up and saying, what can we do? This is Oregon, we can't have excellence. And that is just not true. One of the lessons we need to take from this library is this. This is our community, this is our state. This is not stuff that's happening to us. We have a responsibility around this. And if we want excellence in our public system, if we want excellence in our public services, it's up to us to demand them. And it's up to us to make sure we have them. And the library shows we can do it. We saved a great library. We need to save great schools. This is something that's an important lesson for all of us. Let's use the library as an inspiration to maintain and restore excellence in public service in Oregon. Now, the stories I've just shared with you are examples of ways in which I think Multnomah County has used innovation and risk-taking to make really positive contributions to the programs that we operate, to the core public services that we provide. But the county's responsibility extends beyond just providing programs. And I also want to share with you a couple of examples where the county board has made important and, I think, path-breaking steps to improve the health, well-being, and safety of this community in ways that sometimes requires taking on powerful interests on behalf of the residents of this community. The first one has to do with our property tax records. For more than 100 years, the county, like counties all over the country, maintains property records. And it's an important public service. That way, if you want to know who owns this property, you can find out. It's important for buying, it's important for selling. It's the underpinning of our entire private property system, the notion that you can find records somewhere that tell you who owns these things. Unfortunately, in recent years, our property record system has come under unprecedented assault by something called MERS. MERS is short for the Mortgage Electronic Registration System. It was a creation of the largest banks in this country. They created MERS because they wanted to be able to make it easier for them to take mortgages and combine them with others and cut them up and sell them and resell them and resell them and resell them. It's very profitable. It also, unfortunately, was one of the reasons that our country fell into the economic collapse that we did, because by packaging all these mortgages together, it became impossible to tell what was the underlying value, and it led to the explosion, the bubble that we had, and then subsequently to the collapse. But that's not the only problem with MERS. The other problem with MERS is it destroys our property record system, because the way MERS works is someone who has a loan through MERS, when you go look at who has a loan sold to MERS, you go look at the property record system and it says the owner is MERS. And then they sell it and resell it and resell it and resell it. And at the end of the day, it's impossible for anyone to figure out who actually owns that property. And it's made our more than 100-year-old property record system, frankly, worthless in many instances. And that is a huge problem that will have long-term consequences. And there's another challenge with it as well. By doing it this way, and I'm sure it's just a coincidence, but by doing it this way, the banks also are avoiding paying the recording fee they're supposed to pay each time they sell a property. And what that means is there are millions of dollars that the public is owed, that you are owed, that we are owed, that are not being paid. There are potentially tens of millions of dollars. And we don't even know because we don't know the full scope of the situation. But what we do know is our property record system is under assault and the public is being stolen from. And as a result of that, the Multnomah County Board has initiated a lawsuit against the MERS system. And we're the first in Oregon to do it. There's others in the country, but we're taking them on. And what we seek is nothing but the restoration of our property records so we can tell who owns properties and the payment of the dollars that are owed to this community for property transactions that have already happened. It's a lawsuit, so who knows what happens, but I'm hoping for the best. Another area where we've been willing to take on powerful interests to make things better in this community has to do with tobacco. Smoking is the single leading cause of preventable death in this community and across the country. Smokers, unfortunately, burden our healthcare system with tens of millions of dollars of costs. And again, looking back to evidence, there are some things that are proven by evidence to help decrease smoking. And the single biggest one that there is increasing the price of cigarettes. And that particularly works for kids. If you want to keep kids from smoking, there's nothing better than increasing the price of the cigarettes. So you might think, well, let's try it. Well, it's rather difficult because the cigarette lobby has a pretty firm grip on this state and on this country. A few years back, about 6 years back, in fact, there was a statewide ballot measure. And that ballot measure would have increased cigarette taxes and used the revenues raised to fund vital programs, primarily ones that would help pay for the burden that cigarettes are placing on our society. It's a great idea, I thought. But the tobacco industry, they weren't so fond of it. They spent $15 million in a misleading, deceptive campaign, and they destroyed it. It went down after that campaign in 35 of 36 counties in Oregon. But there was one, Multnomah County, that still said yes. And so you might say, all right, Multnomah County, they believe in the idea that you can raise taxes on tobacco and use those dollars to pay for vital services. Go ahead and do it, Jeff. Only we can't, because the tobacco lobby got the legislators in Salem to preempt us, to say that no matter what your local community wants to do about this, you can't do it. And our single highest legislative agenda in this next session is to get that preemption lifted so that this community can be consistent with its values and support these programs. And I want to close by talking about another unfortunate catastrophe in our country, cause of preventable death, the epidemic of gun violence that we've been suffering through. With the shootings in Clackamas County and then the massacre in Newtown, Connecticut, I know I'm not the only one here who was horrified. As a parent of 2 children, the idea of having kids mowed down in their schools is something I lose sleep over. But unfortunately, one of the things that's developed in the wake of this massacre is the fact that the NRA has pretty much locked this country into having very few meaningful responses. And I think that's outrageous. And one of the things I think we need to do in Multnomah County is to support the good work that President Obama is proposing, the notion of having universal background checks so we know who's buying these guns, and the idea of keeping military-style weapons off of our streets. I think that that is atrocious. I really support that. I hope we can get that done. But the NRA has proven pretty formidable, and they've done a good job of preventing federal legislation. If we aren't able to do that, we also should be supporting the efforts led by Senator Ginny Burdick to make sure that at least in Oregon we can do this. In Oregon we can require background checks. In Oregon we can stop assault weapons. So we really want to support Ginny Burdick in that effort as well. But there's also things we can do locally. I'll tell you, I sometimes, at least we should be able to, I was horrified a couple weeks back when those 2 yahoos walked through the street of Selwood with loaded automatic weapons on their backs. 60 people called 911. A school went into lockdown. To me, this is practically terrorism. This is beyond bullying. This is absolutely designed to intimidate people. And the state law says that we can't do anything about it. And that's an example where the state law should change for the whole state, but even if it doesn't, they need to lift the preemption so that in Multnomah County, we can create a climate that is consistent with our values. Because there may be some parts in the state where walking around with weapons through downtown is appropriate, but it is not appropriate to have people walking through Selwood with loaded automatic weapons, and that's something we should stop. And even if we can't get the law changed, there's another approach I want to just mention for a second. The Second Amendment is important, but like all rights, it is not absolute. The First Amendment does not give you the right to go into a theater and shout fire. And that's because there are rights for the people around you too. Similarly, the Second Amendment might give you the right to have firearms, but it doesn't give you the right to terrorize your neighbors. And I believe the act that we saw in Selwood was an act of criminal menacing. Even if they had the right to have those weapons, they had no right to cause a school to go into lockdown, to give kids nightmares, to have 60 people call 911. And I believe we need to work with our local law enforcement to, in those certain circumstances, arrest those people and take away their guns. And I think that's perfectly within the Constitution. One more thing, I'm almost done. I can tell from Pat that I'm starting to go on, but I'm just about done. This is the last thing I want to say. The last thing I want to say, there are things we can do about the epidemic of gun violence. And one of the things we can do is to try to go upstream and try and prevent the violence in the first place. And one thing that I'm going to be doing, and I'm going to be bringing forward in my budget this year, is an approach to do that. Because all too often, after these crises, we have this situation where we find out that someone was frankly mentally ill, and people didn't really notice it or didn't know what to do about it. And we don't have to keep with that situation. There is a proven program called Mental Health First Aid that we're going to be bringing to Multnomah County. And what this program is essentially the mental health version of CPR, or the Heimlich maneuver. You know, we can't have doctors everywhere, but if you see someone choking and you know the Heimlich maneuver, you can help. That's what we need with Mental Health First Aid. It's a training program that will be designed to train the general public in how to respond to a mental health crisis. We're going to start with first responders and frontline workers, but eventually the idea is to have a core of people throughout the community who know how to recognize a mental health crisis, who know how to respond to a mental health crisis, and who can appropriately deal with the situation. That will make things better. That's something we're doing this year. And now, in deference to Pat, I'm going to say this has been a great opportunity to talk a lot, and I'm going to shut up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all that you shared, and thank you for the insights into what's going on in the county. That was very helpful. And now, if you have a written question on an index card, now is the time that staff will be coming around to pick them up. So if you could hold up the cards, they'll be picked up. The first question for our speaker, as always, will be from today's Friday Forum host, Leslie Moorhead. Leslie is on the club's board of governors. She served as the club's secretary from 2010 to 2012 and was named Member of the Year in 2010. Leslie?
Thank you, Pat. Jeff, I'm going to give you some more time to talk about Multnomah County's mental health system because I think you ran out of time. And I want to frame this question in the context of measurements and metrics and benchmarks for results-oriented. I'm sure you know that in April 2011, coming up on 2 years ago, City Club published a report called Improving the Delivery of Mental Health Services in Multnomah County. And that report states very clearly that City Club thinks that the assessment of the county's mental health treatment outcomes is inadequate. So in the past almost 2 years, how have you improved the ongoing assessments of whether or not the mental health services provided by Multnomah County are actually working?
Thank you. Hello? Is this working? Yep. Yes, well, that's a good question. And I remember well the City Club report. It's one that we've looked at and we've worked with. I feel that one thing that I unfortunately have to say is that in the several years since that report, we have been subjected to, unfortunately, multiple millions of dollars of cuts into our mental health system from state budget cuts. That said, at Multnomah County, we have maintained our local commitment to funding, which has minimized the cuts. But the truth of the matter is, we're further away from where we ought to be now than we were 2 years ago. In terms of assessments, one of the things that we've been able to do in that City Club report, they identified a real challenge in understanding where the money was being spent and trying to figure out how it was being prioritized. And we have implemented, and we're about to begin, a new budget system. We bought new budget software that was significantly designed to answer those questions, to provide more transparency and more understanding of where the dollars are flowing. We also are always assessing our programs, and so, in an individual case-by-case measure, I can respond, but the biggest change we've made has really been in the budgeting area.
We will now take questions from the floor. As always, we invite members to the microphone to ask their question. Asking questions at the Friday Forum microphone is a privilege of City Club membership, and membership is open to everyone. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your question as directly as possible. If I flash this question mark card, it means please hurry up and get to the question.
I'm Edward Hershey. I'm a City Club member. Jeff, I think you probably sell yourself short when you describe yourself as a former entrepreneur, because it sure sounds like it takes as much entrepreneurship to lead Multnomah County as it did in the pretzel business. With that in mind, I have a one-word question. Wapato?
Never heard of it. What? No. Wapato, as many of you know, is a jail that was built by Multnomah County and has never been opened. Frankly, we don't have the need for it, nor do we have the money to open it. So I don't expect it. We have hundreds of jail beds in our existing jails, which are currently not being used. I would be very surprised. Fortunately, crime has gone down in this community significantly since the time they first thought it was a good idea to build Wapato. So the public safety need from our local jail system is such that we don't need that jail. Having said that, we've been working with the state, we've worked with the federal government, we've been trying to find someone who would operate that jail because it's a tremendous wasting asset. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get anything yet. We're still working with the state on that. There are active conversations. There are a number of potential uses for it. Frankly, the most likely use is not as a traditional jail, but as a place for secure alcohol and drug treatment, or as a source for reentry for folks right before they come back into the community. Those are, I mean, you're clapping for the right reason. Those are very needed services. The challenge is how do we pay for them, and that's what we're struggling with, but it is something that we're working on.
Province King City Club member. Chair Cogen, you have been very successful in integrating programs. You have been really good at bringing people, even those you dislike or even those that don't agree with you. You spoke eloquently about what the county is doing. I want to thank you for that. You know I'm a fan. This is not a hardball question. But I want you to tell us what you're doing about integrating equity in all of the fancy, cute, and awesome things you're doing at the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Promise. That's a good question, and it's frankly one of our top priorities. One of the things that we have done at Multnomah County is elevate and adequately staff our Office of Diversity and Equity so that they have the ability, including statistical ability, to understand what's happening with the county. Our current top priority in terms of that is we've created a tool called the Equity Lens. And the Equity Lens is designed to make sure that in all of the actions we take internally and in all of the funding decisions we make externally, that we're thinking about equity, and that we're thinking about, is this advancing our mission of equity, or is this inadvertently not? And it's beginning to change funding decisions, and it's beginning to change the way we orient the government. So I'd say that's the single biggest response that we're making. Thank you.
Thomas Aschenbrenner, City Club member. Jeff, I am thrilled to hear about all the projects and the progress that you have made in working with the Multnomah County Commissioners. But the question that I have is that I'm listening to all of these activities. I realize you are controlling an awful lot of money into this area. So what kind of instructions does the commissioner hold your contracting people to assure that when a contract is let, that the people who are working on that contract are getting living wage jobs, even if that bid is not the lowest bid?
Thank you. That's a good question. And the truth of the matter is, we are responsible for a lot of money. Not as much as I think would be ideal, but our annual budget is somewhere between $1 billion and $1.5 billion a year. A lot of that money is let through contracting. And we have rules at Multnomah County that ensures that our contractors pay a living wage, that ensures, and that it also considers as we evaluate contracts, factors such as, does this contractor provide for health care for their employees? Does this contractor provide for paid sick leave? These kinds of variables, because frankly, those are not only are those our values, but we're the safety net providers. It would be unbelievably foolish for us not to do that, because then they'd be coming to the county to get their services anyway. But more importantly, we do that because we think it's important to walk our talk and to help build a community where everyone who works full-time can live a good life. And that's what we're doing.
Tom Karwacki, City Club member. Last week, I heard you at an announcement talk about committing the county to a moratorium on foreclosures, and I really applaud you on that. What are the next steps that you're going to be taking?
You know, thank you for asking about that. The truth of the matter is I did not commit to that because I could not commit to that. Just to be really clear, we don't have the authority to create a moratorium on foreclosures. That state law makes it very clear that when these foreclosures happen, the sheriff has to enforce them. And what we said was that we would be willing to work to try and create a legal structure that would allow that, and I am. Thousands of our residents have suffered from eviction. We at Multnomah County deal with people who are homeless, and through these foreclosures and evictions, we're actually adding to the totals. It's really unfortunate. But frankly, we have to operate under the law as it now exists, and the legislature creates that law. And what I am committing to doing is to try and change those rules. And the other thing that we're committing to doing is to try and work with our local judges to try and provide more flexibility when eviction notices are given, so that there can be more time to have it be taken in a less traumatic way for families. And the sheriff has also been committed to being a part of these evictions to make sure there's no undue force used to evict people.
Brandon Spencer Hartle, City Club member and Programs Manager at the Historic Preservation League of Oregon. Multnomah County owns and operates a number of historic buildings and bridges that are also vulnerable to earthquakes. And one of the conversations that the state has been having is that we know in Portland and statewide we are overdue. I know 2 of your fellow commissioners have been working on the county courthouse, but maybe you can give us what your vision looks like for upgrading and making resilient our infrastructure here in Multnomah County.
Well, that's a great question, and frankly, it is an extremely daunting one. We live in a community where most of the buildings and infrastructure was built before people really understood the extent to which we were in a high threat for earthquakes. It's the case right now that of the bridges that cross the Willamette, if there was a major earthquake, none of the ones that are there right now would be operational. And that's a big problem. The Selwood Bridge, when it's built, that'll be okay. But we need to make sure that the others are as well. Frankly, that's going to take a lot of money. Same with other infrastructure. We've been working at the county to try and upgrade our facilities and, frankly, to get out of facilities that are not upgradable. I'll give you an example. Our health department, headquarters and downtown clinics are in a building called the McCoy Building. Among the services we provide there are the emergency operations for responding to public health emergencies like you might get in an earthquake. They're in a building that will pancake in an earthquake. So what we're doing, fortunately, in partnership with our friends at the City of Portland, is building a new seismically safe headquarters for the health department so we can have our emergency responders be in a building that actually survives so they can actually help respond. That's the kind of action we're doing, but the truth of the matter is we have 130 locations, and we're working on this in a piecemeal basis. I think it's important that we make progress. I think it's important that we identify the issue, but I don't want to give people any sense of false hope. There's many more buildings that are seismically unsafe than that are seismically safe in this community.
I'm afraid that we've run out of time for further questions, and we'll have to stop for the day. Please join us next week to hear from the chairs and vice chairs of the Oregon Advocacy Commissions. And as we close for today, please join me in offering a sincere thanks to today's speaker, Jeff Cogen. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.